There's a whole queue of people slowly leaving the kitchen area. That's nice. We still have more chairs here. So when you go out of the kitchen, go to your right, not to your left. There's place here. Thank you, Lisa. All right, wow, such a turnout. It's really nice to see you all here, given that the trains are not, part of them are not working today, and we have people joining us online as well. Generally, this talk is recorded, so if you will be asking questions or answering questions, we will be hearing you, but probably not seeing you. And you can watch this talk later on our YouTube. And when I say our, I mean Women Techmakers. So this is our second meetup of the year, and I'm excited that you all join us. Who is attending the Women Techmakers meetup for the first time? More than half, 2/3 maybe, cool. Nice, we're excited that you are here. Women Techmakers is a Google developer groups community, and our goal is to make the Berlin tech scene more diverse. So we're always excited to see people from all the groups, all the genders, all the backgrounds, with tech experience, new to tech. We try to have all sorts of events to have them fit for everyone. And who is here a developer who is working regularly with Git? Half? Slightly less than the number of people who is attending for the first time. Who is here on the side of product or project management, who is writing things for people to do in Git or using Git? Cool. People who did not raise their hands, what are you doing? No, I am asking because I want to know. You can just yell answers into the air. And afterwards, we will stay for networking until 9:30. Last few words about Women Techmakers. So we meet, the one regular meetup we have is a Friday morning, the last Friday of the month. We do a Stammtisch, which is very casual. We just meet and chat about nothing specific. I recognize some people who attend there. That's fun, especially if you don't like evening events, if it's not working in your schedule or you're tired after work or something. And we have different events throughout the year. We have some more technical, some more on the soft skills, like how to write CV and so on. And we have our celebration of Women's Day. This year it will be on March 20th, so in about 2 weeks from now at the Deutsche Telekom Accelerator. This is in the west of the city, and it will be on the focus Surprise AI. So we'll have 3 women from the AI ecosystem of Berlin speaking about their work a little bit and how their company fits into the Berlin AI ecosystem. We have the events on Meetup, so if you saw this event there, you probably know how to find yourself. And we are on Twitter, so if you see anything you like, we do encourage you to tweet. It's just WTM Women Techmakers _Berlin. We also have a Slack channel where you are welcome to post jobs or to say that you are looking for a job. If you do post a job there, then please follow the template. Otherwise, you're welcome to just join the conversation and have fun today. So we will start by welcoming Inbal Cohen. Inbal, please join us and introduce yourself.
Hello. Do I need both?
I think you should be okay with it.
Can you hear me? Yes. I'm going to put down my water. Hello, everyone. My name is Inbal. Am I too loud? Am I okay? Good. So hi, my name is Inbal. I'm a product lead. Let me show my nifty presentation. It says intro, so you know this is what I'm supposed to show you right now. Okay. So hi, my name is Inbal. I'm a product lead. I've been building products for over 11 years. I love mobility. I've been doing a lot of Fintech, and I'm doing mobility and something that has to do with sustainability at the moment, which is very exciting. I lead product development and data science teams, which I find all very exciting and fun. I build strategies for companies, and I love hiring people that I believe that are smarter than me, which is a recommendation that I have for other people. And today we're going to talk about product and project management, and maybe a note, because the next part, thank you, Natalie, for taking the next part of my presentation. So let's jump on to the next one. Good. So my question is, what would you like to achieve today? Because, this is a note, a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about today are pretty obvious. And the reason that I'm going to state a lot of obvious things is because sometimes the things that are obvious are actually things that we stop doing or we forget to do in our everyday job. So I have 3 Post-its. Is there someone that would like to tell me what would they like to achieve today? And then maybe I managed to stand by your expectations. Yes?
Learn about product management trends.
Yeah, someone else? Yes. Oh. And the last one? Skill set for product management? Yes. Okay, in the end, we'll have to make sure that I don't disappoint you. Fantastic. So let's start from the beginning. Good. Let's talk about the obvious. And I have a bunch of really cool GIFs, and then you can decide which one you feel you understand the best. So we're in a rat race, right? In our everyday work, we're just delivering, and we're continuing to do the work that we're used to getting done. Sometimes, again, we're forgetting about the obvious. And, right? Good. I'm happy you understand the reference. I'm always so worried that people don't understand my references. Good. So here's a few questions that I would like you to think about and kind of while I'm giving this talk, right? So have a project that you're working on in mind, because I'm assuming that everybody's working on some type of project, or you have a project in mind that you would like to work on. And answer these questions for yourselves. Why are you working on this project? Who is going to enjoy it? What does your customer or user need? Like, what do they actually need? How soon or how often is it supposed to be ready or updated? Not just what you're told. Like, do you actually know the product that you're working on, right? What is success? Not this sprint or this release. Like, what's success for this product, right? What need is the project fulfilling? What's the bigger strategy this project is part of? And who is that customer? Who is that user? Who is the person that is actually using your software? And it's not just a human being. Most of us are probably developing for human beings. So what is that type of person? Okay? So these are the types of things that make and break a company, I believe. And these are the types of things that I advocate in the companies that I work for. Making sure that people have a good understanding and the answers for these questions. Because the reason is these are the types of things that can make and break a company, especially if it's a smaller company that doesn't have so many people to put the weight on. Another interesting thing is that these are the types of things that define prioritization for us. And this is me speaking as a product manager, right? What is more important than something else, right? What should get done first? And another thing is these topics are a very major thing for communication. And I'll talk about communication in a few minutes. Good. Let's talk a little bit about tasks to be done. Remember, we're stating the obvious, but just kind of ruminate, are you doing these things? So there's this matrix, it's called the Eisenhower matrix, and it talks about things that it rates a different task on a scale of urgency and importance, right? So obviously the things A and B are very urgent, C and D are not so urgent. In terms of importance, B or D are very important. And now again, I need some volunteers, right? Because I have 4 questions, and from my volunteers, I would like to have an answer for all 4. What are the things that you actually work on the most, right? The things that you find hardest to work on. What would you like to work on the least? And what things would you want to work on? What excites you? What type of tasks on this matrix would you like to work on the most? 4 people. The first 4 people that raise their hand get the opportunity to answer my amazing question. Who's taking it? Yes, please. Which one? D? Yeah.
It's urgency, but really important. Hardest to work on, it's, of course, B. It's high urgency, high importance. What to do the least, of course, B. And what to work on, C.
I like it. You raise your hand as well. Yeah.
I'd like to object to that.
Good.
In our world of weekly spread, quite often we work the most on the urgent and important things on B. It's the hardest to work on things that are important but not urgent. So I guess it's D. We want to work on things that are important but not urgent. So because we want to work on things that are important but not urgent.
Want to work on, sorry.
Yes.
Important but not urgent as well, yeah?
Yeah, and we want to do these things that are neither important nor urgent.
Fantastic. 2 more. Don't leave me hanging. I know you have ideas. Should I choose someone? Are you agreeing? Like if everybody's agreeing, that's also perfectly fine, right? Agree with the second one. Fantastic. Interesting that A is not in any of the choices. Fantastic. Let me reveal. Look at this amazing work. Ta-da. Okay, so when we're talking about tasks to be done, there is a consensus about the different types of tasks. And we can also see how this correlates together. I think you can guess, right? So things that are not urgent and not important, we don't want to do those. And this is obvious, but this is an extremely important point to communicate with stakeholders that are asking you to do all sorts of tasks, right? If they have a good understanding of the difference between urgent and important and this matrix, it's very easy for you to start making arguments and create and have more independence on the decisions of the tasks that you're being able to pick up. The one on the top, these are noisemakers. They're not urgent. They're very urgent, as if, but they're not important. And here comes a very interesting point. There needs to be an understanding within the company and within the team and between the teams that you're working with, what is importance for the company, right? That really leads into the first questions. So being able to identify tasks that are noisemakers to be able to reduce them from your work, right? We want to do less of things that are very urgent and very important. We all know that's firefighting, right? Rushing to get things done, everything, the house is on fire, and we want to do more things that are urgent, not urgent and important. This specific matrix has been very helpful for me in being able to explain the type of tasks that my teams are picking up to other people in leadership and companies that I work in. So it's a very powerful tool, and I can really recommend using it. Jumping into the next point. Yes, please.
Is it possible to ask a question?
Let's try. Yes.
I was just wondering, where does the potentially the experimentation of features fit there? Because it might not have a clear and established importance yet, but on the other side, it might be actually crucial to still with.
Thank you very much for your question. I won't answer it directly. I will go to my next slide, and then we'll see if it answers it at least partially, right? Because we're talking about the, yes?
Yeah, no, please finish.
Oh, okay. No, I'm going to the next one.
Okay, good. Then I wanted to ask a follow-up question. So, Matrix is great.
It's great, but do you think it will change depending on the business model that the company has and depending on how it's financed, let's say?
Do you think that things are on a different scale than urgent and important, regardless of...
I'm not saying that as in how, I don't want to challenge as in how metrics. I just want to say that I guess that if the company is, let's say, bootstrapping or at a seed stage, then everything is kind of urgent and important, and you have to. I'm not saying it's a good way. I'm just saying it's realistic. But if you are an established corporation, then definitely like what you present makes a lot of sense. Also, just I guess not all the teams have luxury of doing it how you show it.
Yes. And I'll give you a fun fact. Most of my career has been in startups. I did have a short period of time that I worked for a very large company. If you check out my LinkedIn, you'll know which one. But this works, and it's actually very beneficial to break down larger ideas, and it forces the people that have great ideas to distill them into actual tasks that part of them are more important than others, right? And then it's not so much of not important and important. It's a scale, and things might be more important than others, right? So it does work also in startups, but it requires much more time and deliberation, like deliberately thinking about each and every task that is being done and not just considering things as larger concepts, which is a pitfall, right? Sometimes there's a larger concept that's a really good idea, but within it, each and every task can be categorized. But I'll jump forward because I have a limit of time, and we can also talk about that more because these are topics that, yeah, I like working on these things. Good. So how do we spend our time, right? So we have the metrics, and now we're going to a next part. There are types of work to be done. And if I'm looking at the different types of categories, we have new stuff, right? This is the new cool stuff that we want to work on, new business ideas, new business opportunities, new features, whatever it could be. We have operational work, which is keeping the lights on. We have technical debt, which is fixing things that are broken. And in the end, and again, I'm explaining the obvious, but think about this process. And in the end, you need to do some type of triage to understand and to decide what are we going to work on within this increment of time that we have. Maybe it's a sprint. Now the question is, and I won't open it because we don't have so much time, but have a thought in your mind on the percentage of work that your team does. How much of it is new stuff? How much of it is operational work? And how much of it is technical debt? And this is a very interesting conversation that I have, again, with a lot of leaders that are not in tech positions. The reason being is that sometimes, not in all companies, but sometimes business have the kind of feeling that tech aren't catching up. They want to do all these cool things, and sometimes they feel like tech don't want to do the cool things, which is a very common misconception, but it's not true. Everybody wants to work on cool things. Just a lot of times we're being responsible to get stuff done that actually has to get done, which is the lower portion. And here I'm going to reveal again. Ta-da! So these are my thoughts on it, right? Each and every person can have his own. I believe that a good team, a highly functioning team, does between 50 and 70% of work is new stuff. You're having fun, you're having a blast, you're trying stuff out. 20 to 30% you're doing operational work, and 5 to 10% you're doing technical debt, which is difficult because most teams and most people that join teams aren't building new cool stuff. They're working on a product that already exists, right? And other people did all sorts of stuff that you might not agree with and you think that it's absolutely necessary to fix. The way that I explain this to leadership that is not tech is that I have a concept of a vegetable cake. This is my vegetable cake. So what I explain is, when I was a kid growing up, my parents told me that I have to eat my vegetables before I can get dessert. And this is exactly it. You have to eat your technical debt, you have to work on your operational work in order to get cake, which is working on new stuff. And everybody wants to eat cake. No one wants to just eat broccoli all day, right? So being able to split up the work that we're working on and taking of all three, right, can create a higher motivation within the team, not only for the development team, but also higher motivation for the other people within the company because they see that the new cool ideas that they have are actually being established. Now, this is a cute thing. I really like icebergs. And yeah, I used to have a lot of icebergs in this. This is a workshop that I do in a different type of, let's say, way in the companies that I work in. And I used to have a lot of icebergs in it. But I left this one because I have one. So this is the product backlog iceberg, and this is something that I explain as well. So on the very top are the things that are absolutely clear. They're high priority. They were chosen as high priority because we're working on them right now. So obviously they're the most important things that need to be done. And they're the most clear and detailed things that we have in knowledge of the things that we want to build, right? A little bit bigger chunks are the next release, a little bit less clear, and then under the line of the iceberg, underwater, are the things that are in future releases, things that we want to get done, they're a concept, they're a bigger construct. That also relates to the point of being able to put things into the matrix when they're so big for future releases, something in the future, you have some type of idea. But closer and closer that you go to the iteration that you're working on and the release that you're working on right now, we need to go back and ask the same questions, making sure that we're working on the right things. Because the right things that were a few months ago, you probably know, might not be the right things for now. Going ahead. So here's a common misconception, and this is for the people in the audience that are not in product and not in tech, right? Or haven't done product specifically. And a little bit on why do we do things in a certain kind of way when we're thinking about agile? Because agile sometimes is kind of a buzzword and we don't really understand where it comes from. So one of the ways, and this comes from, right, some advice that I gave a friend that was actually working on her work in university. And I told her, use Trello, like try it out. You have a project to manage. She presents this Trello and she's very proud of it. And each and every lane was a project of its own with a bunch of Post-its in it, right? Or large milestones. Some of them she actually organized in some type of order, as if in prioritization. Some of them she tried to group up with a color, right? But this is the way that people might think about arranging a project. And that would be very difficult, especially when you're talking about a team of multiple people, right? How can I understand? How can I decipher this thing? So a little bit of putting sense into why do we do things in an agile way, right? One of the disadvantages of this is it's very difficult to have a concept of time, dependencies, team structure, right? Prioritization, what comes before, what comes after, what happens if something is not really ready on time, communication and marketing. And when I say marketing, it's internal marketing within the company. Like, how do you make other people understand what you're actually working on? So we'll have this in mind. How am I on time? Okay. So moving to the next thing, and we're going to go back to actually how we organize, how do we organize work? But again, stating a little bit of the obvious things and have them in mind, right? Not such great things to do that happen when people do agile, or they think that they're doing agile, right? One of them is over-documenting. Very tiring. You get this really long doc, and this person is super disappointed. Why did you not read? It was said in section 17, and you're like, I didn't read it. They get very disappointed. There's a lot of micromanaging that might come from that. Like, this is how you should get the work done, and not having an understanding that you should hire the type of people that you don't need to tell them how to get their job done. Assuming, right? I'm not going to say the sentence that I have in mind because it's not so PG, but assumptions are the, yeah. But if you ask me later, I'll tell you what the sentence is. So people a lot of times assume things. Again, the obvious, but it's not obvious. What's obvious to me is not obvious to you. You can read through the different types of things. You might feel like you understand them as well, right? One of them as well is waterfall. People think that they're doing agile, but they're actually kind of doing waterfall with sprints, which is not so cool. So what are the types of things that are great to do, or I think are great to do? And these are also things that I think that you should remind yourself and remind the product person or the project person within your team, right? If we're saying that we're doing agile, we're following a set of ideas that are agreed upon by everyone. Is this big enough? Yes, it is. Okay. Good thing I looked how it looks like halfway through. Okay, so we have individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Have a conversation. We are human beings. We can talk about things, not 10,000 meetings a day, right? But have a conversation with me and have an understanding of what I think about what you want to get done. And I might be able to give you another idea or a different way of getting things done, right? Working software over comprehensive documentation. You can have 10,000 words stuffed somewhere in Confluence, but what am I actually developing, right? You can read customer collaboration over contract negotiation and responding to change instead of having a very elaborate plan. The last one is interesting because a lot of times people think that agile is some kind of chaotic way of getting things done. It's not. It is a plan. It's just not a meticulously planned and documented, right? It's not planned to the T. We have a good understanding of what we want to get done. For that, again, the team needs to know really well what we want to get done. And it paves a way for us in milestones instead of describing each and everything on the road ahead. Again, things not to do in software development, not so much. Waterfall, right? These are one of the biggest differences. So documenting as much as you want, the people that are supposed to read it will read, right? If the person that you're working with only says, I'm going to only read the Jira ticket, you need to write it short enough to fit into a Jira ticket, right? It's just how it is. You're not trying to change people as much as you're going to try to adapt and be agile. Okay, higher grade people, and having continuous improvement, which is a very big thing. Having lean teams that have really good communication, having a strategy that is known to the different team members. If everybody understands what we're working on, it makes it a lot easier to not document as much, and communicating a lot. Okay, so now we're back to this. This is agile. No, I'm not going to do a whole, I hope you know this. Like, I hope you've seen this more than once. I'm not going to explain it, but I want to talk to you a little bit about whatever your, maybe it's a sprint, maybe it's not, but how your work is organized. It doesn't matter if you're working Scrum or Kanban or whatever it is, right? Why are we organizing work in this type of way? Like, why are we not doing a project per lane? Like, how does that actually make sense? And again, this is also for the people that actually know Scrum and Kanban and everything that has to do with Agile, and the people that want to get into this profession. But we're looking at work as a continuous line. It's a loop-de-loop, like you can see here. It's a loop-de-loop. And the reason that it's a loop is because not everything has to be done all at once. We're not trying to finish the entire product right now. We're taking small increments, looking at them, making sure that we're doing the most important thing, and only then we're going into executing it, right? So we have a funnel, which is an amazing place. It could be called an ice box, a bucket list, whatever you want to call it. And that's a really long list of things that I want to get done. This is a fantastic place to put everybody's fantastic ideas in. right? People from, maybe from business can come up, people from wherever within the company have amazing ideas that they want to share. Have a place for it. You don't need to just, shrug it off and say, whatever, talk to someone else. There's a place for it. It's fantastic. Everybody feels that they can express themselves. The second part is that we're going to analyze, we're going to think about, we're talking about that triage process. We're talking about those new stuff. Is it a new stuff? Is it a new thing that we want to get done? Right? Is it operational? Going into the backlog, the movement, you can also read what it says, but the movement of things within this development process is also very flexible. And we need to remember that. It's not obvious. It is obvious to us, but it might not be obvious to other people within the company. The time increment that all of this happens might not be obvious to everybody within the company. Is it 1 week? Is it 1 month? Is it 2 weeks? Each and every person here can give a different amount of time. So making sure that other people within the company understand that, and they know that just because we're not working on your thing right now, doesn't mean that we're not going to get to it very soon, or in 2 weeks, or in a week, or how long your sprint is. Okay, am I going to try to rush? Am I out of time? I don't know. Okay, I'll try to do it fast. Okay. So why is strategy extremely important? So a company can advertise to the people within the company, or whatever about people outside of the company, but inside the company, they can advertise the strategy in different ways. One, there's the vision and mission. There's a company all hands. They talk about all sorts of stuff. Department all hands. We have team demos. Hopefully, we have OKRs and KPIs, management meetings. We have documentation. We have training. And I have a few questions with a raise of hands. Be honest. How many of you know the company that you're working at, the vision and mission? Like, 2, 4, less than half? Okay, but that's also good. That's really good. That's really, really good. How many of you know the OKR or KPI of your current sprint? Way less than half. Okay. Interesting, right? Things that are obvious. How many of you actually listen to the company all hands? Yeah. No, half hand is, okay, so less than half. How many of you have ever visited all hands of another department? I have 1, I have 2, I have like 5. And how many of you have been invited to an all hands of another department? Like, do you even have the invite in your calendar? Very cool. Are you all developers though? No. Yes? 1 developer? Yeah. Okay. And the last one, how many times, so it's not really how many times, but can you recall recently, let's say in the past 4 sprints, that an outsider joined your demo? Not so many, 2 for 6. Okay, so that gives us a lot of insight into what people know about what your team is actually doing. And how well will they know what your team is doing if they're pretty much never there, right? And if you're not participating in the ways to understand what's going forward, which we will link to Git. Okay, so knowing and understanding the product strategy helps us plan our product better. If I know that something is coming up in the whatever sales department, all hands, they sold something that we don't have, I have a heads up on the types of things that they're going to think are cool and amazing, right? I have a good idea of the new stuff that might be coming into my funnel, and I can already have some type of idea if I think that's new and cool as well. And what about the work that I'm doing right now and how that could fit in, right? So asking questions and not assuming is such an important part of our work. everybody's work within a company. It's not just for leadership, and it's something that helps us gain much more independence in the work that we're working on, right? I think that a nice example of something that I was working on recently is that we were working on a whole thing for user management. There were a few hundred users, and the team had no idea that there is this plan to kind of explode and turn from a few hundred users to many, many thousands. If they had that knowledge in mind, they would have been able to plan their work accordingly in advance and not be surprised. And the amount of cool stuff that you would be able to get done would be increased in comparison to the tech debt or the operational work that you have actually created for yourself unintentionally, right? Being able to participate in decision making, saying if you think that one thing is a better idea than another, you're getting the tools from having the knowledge on the strategy, and whatever is happening within the company gives you the tools to be more independent and have much more management buy-in on the things that you actually want to get done within the team. So being able to also control the work that you're getting done. Okay. Breather. Gifts. What did we talk about today? Hopefully something synced in. So why are we working on the project that we're working on? Right? Hopefully you recognize this movie as well. The Eisenhower Matrix. How does that fit into the work that we're working on right now? Do I have a good understanding of the project that I'm working on? Is it important? Is it urgent on the specific task that I'm working on? Triaging. No one likes firefighting. Let's work on cool stuff. Let's eat less vegetables and have more cake. I think that anyone would be happy to be in a team that the ratio is 70% of new cool stuff. And the hidden iceberg, again, right? Working on cool new stuff and not so much on the technical depth. Everything that has to do with managing projects, right? Taking control to your own hands as a team and making decisions that will help and benefit the company going forward. No one wants to waste time, especially not the business people. Business people might not understand into depth what you're actually doing, but they do understand how quickly they can get the stuff that they want to get. Strategy, having a good understanding of the strategy of the company and the product that you're working on can give you strength and give you much more credit within the company that you're working in. Having a better understanding of what you're doing. Dependencies, okay. I'll have to come again and talk to you about dependencies, but dependencies, there's this whole thing. This is like a beautiful dependencies. No, but we can talk about dependencies as well. I think I'm like way over time, but dependencies, what to do and when, which is a big thing. Okay, where's my thing? Last question. I'll try to make it quick. I have many Post-its. I don't need as many volunteers, although I would be happy if so many answered. But I have a question. This is a bit of a riddle, right? You know the concept of riddle. Can someone share with me something that they knew already, something that they learned, possibly, maybe you didn't learn anything, and something that is still unknown to you in relation to this talk?
How to explain to non-technical stakeholders the technical complexities and why we can't build something that fast or that quick.
Yeah.
Could you repeat that? Because I can hear and I cannot see.
Oh. Yes.
Thank you.
No. Okay. Each Post-it I add, I'll zoom in and out. Yes, Miro. Yes.
Hi. As a researcher, I'm not in the world, but I have known about Eisenhower Matrix and have used it in the research context before. I learned. What did I learn? So I learned a lot. I was trying how to phrase this. I love the way that you communicate or appreciate it, the way you communicate, your tone of voice, the pace of your speaking, so the communication of everything that you've said today was a lot more valuable to me than any of the information in there, because more or less I knew about it, but that's something that I appreciated or learned.
It's awesome, is that what?
Yeah, that sums it up. You would be a good researcher, getting the core out. And then what's still unknown, yeah, I think I will go with that in test point.
Oh,
It is
yeah.
times two.
We'll add another one behind it. Yes. Anyone else? Yes.
I don't know if it's still unknown or something. I just want to share something that made me wonder. Like what we saw today, as you said in the beginning, were relatively basic concepts that the vast majority of product managers knows and tries to go that direction. Yet on some questions that you asked us, whether we apply it in practice like that or whether it is happening, there was often as well less than half responding positively. So I was just wondering, does it maybe mean, because of course we are all striving to go that direction, but we all, I think, have seen how hard it is. So I'm wondering, should these concepts maybe try to become a bit more realistic, considering the actual state of the businesses and companies? Because this seems like a ideal theory, which is very, very hard to put in practice. So this is what kind of triggered me a little bit, since we're very far from it, and it's a common standard, whether these things should get adapted a bit more to the actual real facts and possibilities.
I love that. And it's also a really good question. Like, as a concept, are most of the teams that you've ever worked in or teams that you know, are most of them high-performance teams? Or are they just kind of okay teams or maybe below par teams? And these are the types of things that make the difference, right? How much am I participating? I'm just a developer, but how much am I participating in everything that has to do? And how motivated am I with a really understanding of what my company does? Yeah, sorry, thank you.
Thank you very much for the talk. I think that I would join the previous speaker. I think that what was really useful is the questions and also seeing how the audience responds to, like, I don't know, participating in other teams' lives or knowing the vision and the mission. So yeah, there was actually, I didn't expect such a low number of like hands raised. My question would be, so it's about my previous workplace, right? So speech vectors, and what you kind of described here is a situation where you get stuff, like you mentioned, the sales team that sells stuff that doesn't exist, and then you have to implement it. I'm a product manager, by the way. I once got a contract that was signed. It already had the word iframe in the contract, I swear. So it was like, you know, part of the legal document. So, question, how do you sell this to like C-level people, executive people, business people? I'm not even talking about product, because product leadership usually understands this. But like the CEO or COO or who knows?
These are exactly the type of people.
Only the purple sticker is interesting. How to pitch
Yes.
this to non-product and tech people? Because just last thing, it's like one thing that I would like to stop is like being seen as an execution team, you know?
Absolutely. I have so many things to say about that. Yes.
So what I knew was the frameworks that you showed, which was Safe, Scrum, Agile. I think in the industry it's quite well known nowadays. Yeah, I moved now from the Nordics. There it's quite common to use that. In Germany it's coming, even in the big companies. What I liked was actually that I think I met the first time product manager where I very much trust your capabilities. My experiences usually with product managers, frankly speaking, where they did a Scrum workshop, read the 16 pages of Scrum, did the exam, the basic one, and then they were managers of Scrum, and that was basically it about it. So, yeah, as I said, the first time the product manager, which I would very much trust in her skills. Regarding the unknown part, I think what I really would like to know is, as I said, it's basically the frameworks that we discussed were the status quo. What is there more? I guess since you're an expert in the industry, which kind of secret new things do you have that someone should look at? Because I think Scrum was developed in the 1990s or early 2000s, so it's not a new framework, it's just coming up right now. So that would be very interesting. Like, where do you see like industries moving? Where are the small things that someone actually that is looking into becoming a product manager should look out and actually focus on, because that's the next step.
Interesting, because you're saying Scrum, and that's something that a lot of people do, and actually put it here somewhere because obviously we don't have time for it. But it's not just Scrum, it's Agile, and if I would answer your question shortly, is not to follow frameworks. That's not the point of Agile. The framework is just a suggestion. Like, this is a frame. You're supposed to put in your actual team and your actual company and your actual product in it and adjust it to be, right, agile. So you're supposed to maneuver with it. It's not supposed to be something that you do exactly the same all the time. You're supposed to morph it into something of your own. And I love that you asked that, because these are the types of things that I do in my job, is building up new types of frameworks for each and every company and team that I join to make sure that it actually fits the team that's working. But yes.
If I may add, it's very funny that you say that, because I think in the first sentence of the Scrum guide, the less you adjust it, the better it works. So that it actually contradicts what you said. I agree with you. I agree fully with you.
Yes, that's why I'm not such a fan of Agile. Good. I had the symbol, the sign that I need to get off stage. This is where they get a thing and they pull me off. So thank you for your attention. I'm Inbal. Please feel free to add me on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Inbal. And one more time, thank you, Inbal. That was the first meetup I think I had with a postmortem or a retro on stage. That's really cool. We should do more of that. So we will have now a 15 minutes break. If you need the bathrooms, it's these two. Food and drinks, if you need some air or fire. And we will meet here at 8:15 for the panel. I'm going to bring some questions. If you have some questions, raise your hand and ask them. See you in 15 minutes.
said that the color doesn't matter, but clearly green is the best color.
Yes. This is not even holding it that well. People in the back, if you can hear us well, can you raise your hand? Not yet. Is this louder now?
Yeah,
People in the back, if you hear us, please raise your hand. People. So my goal is not to speak in my regular voice. If you hear me in the back, can you raise your hand?
Come on, Pat. Test, test. Oh,
Now it's
here we go. Oh, too much.
It's a hard, it's difficult to not get feedback, huh? Test, 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 test.
especially after giving all the feedback to Inbal.
Hard to beat.
So last attempt. If you hear us in the back, please raise your hand. Yes, nice. Everybody here is cool. The guys who are in the back, the group, there are some chairs here. If you can go all the way towards the door, you will find the chair to sit. There's also some chairs here, so you can go forward and then either to the right or to the left.
And then present yourself to the group.
Cool, so the second half of today is the panel. And the panel is a little bit interesting because it's not a trivial, the cross-section between product development and Git. And before we start with my questions, Inbal, you have introduced yourself. We know you have a very soothing voice. There was a general agreement in the crowd that that was only 45 minutes. That was the only 45 minutes of meeting that everybody was relaxed after.
Well,
Thanks for that. Scott, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself? You are the co-founder of GitHub, and now you're a co-founder of GitLab, and you had some other...
Close. GitButler.
GitButler, oh no.
It would be weird if I was a co-founder of both GitHub and GitLab.
Yes.
Where they really fought each other. But yeah, GitHub is the server thing that probably one or two people in the room use, and then GitButler is a client, so we're trying to do kind of the opposite side of that. And GitLab.
Well, don't use them. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. And does somebody work for GitLab here? I feel like people got mad at me for that. That guy does. That's why. Sorry, continue.
So you are now the co-founder of GitButler, which is hosting us today. We chatted briefly, and you said you're using AI for all sorts of things. So I'm just gonna leave that as a pistol and first act. We will be coming back to that.
Sure.
And I have prepared the questions, and I was waving my hand so much I moved from them. So why should we use GitButler?
Oh. Okay, I thought we were going to talk about product management stuff, but...
It's building up.
Yeah, that's fine. So, I mean, I'll try to roll it into product management stuff. So, I obviously I worked at GitHub for a long time, and I left, and I started a new company, which was a language learning company actually called Chatterbug, which you guys want to see on the things out here.
What languages do you learn?
I learned German, actually, which is why I'm here.
To what level?
Which is why I'm probably B2. Are you going to start asking me questions in German?
Warum?
This could be.
Ja.
Ja, wir können im Deutsch reden, wenn du willst. Also, ja. Also.
Ach so, and genau, that's what you mean.
Wow. It worked.
No, it's not that good. But the product did fairly well, but it's very difficult, I think, still to find product market fit, right? To figure out actually, I find it very interesting, the sort of product management. How do you figure out what to work on? What is important? What are the people that are using your product need, and what do they respond to? And finding that product market fit is always really, really, really difficult. And so we did that for
6 years or so. Sorry, I feel like I'm real loud. We did that for 6 years or so. That has spun off and continues to be a product. If you want to learn Spanish or French or German or English, you can use that. And I looked for kind of the next thing to do, and I think like any startup type person, you kind of look at what are the frustrations in your daily life, what is interesting, what do you want to see become a product in the world, and that you would want to use yourself or that you want to pay for yourself. And I looked back at Git. Again, I was at GitHub for a long time. I wrote the Pro Git book. Like I've been doing Git stuff for a really long time. And I looked at it and realized that it hasn't really changed in 15 years if you look at Git itself, or maybe 40 years if you look at version control generally. There's not that, I don't know, nobody's as old as I am in this room probably, but like if you've used RCS or
SVN.
Git, like is there really anything, SVN, like is it that much different? Like there are differences, but like the way you do diffs or the way you do merges or branches, they're different, but they're not massively different, these command line tools. So I thought it would be really interesting to be like, if we just threw it all away and had to reimagine it from scratch, but still interact with GitHub, because that is really where a lot of work, that's the hub of software and open source. What does that look like, right? And GitHub never owned the client. And so if it had owned the client, what would that look like? That was kind of the product idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was interesting enough to kind of invest the time into. So that's the idea. Too long of an answer, maybe.
I'm happy I didn't need to answer that question.
Say again?
I'm happy I didn't need to answer that question.
Why do you do what you do?
How do you get people to use GitButler?
Oh, that's a great question. So, I mean, I think we try to identify people's frustrations. I think this is kind of, down your idea of what is important and what is urgent, right? I think for me, what's really important is what is frustrating. Like I think the most important thing in product development is paving cow paths. Like you try to see, I don't know if anybody knows that phrase, but like if you look at where you build roads and then you see what like the off-road that has been beaten off that people didn't design, and then you look at that and be like, what if we just paved this because this is obviously the route people want to take. I like that, right? I like seeing what are people trying to do and they're getting around their tools in order to do it, and how can we make that a nice experience rather than something that they have to fight their tools to do. And identifying the cow paths to pave is I think part of the challenge. It's always interesting. You have to talk to a lot of people and you have to learn how people work. But yeah, that's kind of how we've been approaching the problem.
Okay. What are some, when you were still in GitHub, was there some like I wish this would be different that you materialized in GitButler and you're proud of?
Yeah, I mean, I yes and no. I think what I've thought about from the point of view of this company is trying to figure out if GitHub had owned the client. Like almost every version control tool owns the client and owns the server and can dictate kind of what that communication looks like, and says, if I want to add a feature, then I can add it to the client and I can add it to the server, and then these things will work in parallel. GitHub was never able to do that. We never owned the client. We never owned Git. It was an open source project that was completely independent and had to work with GitLab, and had to, like this guy, he runs GitLab, I think, had to work with GitLab and had to work with Bitbucket and whatever else. And so we couldn't dictate, hey, we have a new feature that would be really cool, and so we'll just add it to the client, we'll add it to the server, and that will be, we didn't own the sort of end-to-end. Yes, you have a question? I'm kidding. So I think that's what's interesting to us, is being able to own that, but from it still works within a GitHub world, right? In that philosophy. And other version control systems have been able to do that, like Perforce or Subversion or whatever, where they're kind of owning both of these, both commercially and on an open source level. But there's also, I think, a matter of taste. Like I think GitHub had good taste, and I want to bring good taste to this problem of what do software developers want to do, and how do they want to work, and how do they want to get work done. And it's a really, really difficult question, right? Like everybody in this room probably has a completely different workflow. And so we have to have the taste to say, I don't like 30% of your workflows, and we're not going to do that. And we'll try to convince you to do ours, which we think is better. And we'll take best practices from what we think people can do their best work in, and try to accommodate that and convince the rest of the people to kind of come onto that. And GitHub did the same thing, right? Like we didn't do everything that you could do with Git or everything a Git server could do. We said, here's what we want, this pull request workflow, and we want this to be the way that you review code, and we're going to kind of force you to do this. And if large companies came to us and said, we'll give you $1 million to add this feature, we'd be like, I don't care, that's not important, right? Because it's a bad workflow. And it's hard to have that opportunity, for one, and privilege, but also to turn down, a large opportunity, right?
Okay, and a jump to you, Inbal. Scott, you mentioned how you were trying different, recognizing pain points and so on, and this is also kind of how you started the workflow, or the entire presentation, and I recognize that both are very much human-focused. How have you been seeing AI go into all of this, other than complete this sentence for me and write this description for me?
Wow. So first of all, it's an amazing tool, right? But
it's a technology.
It's a
set of tools, yeah.
But it's like a tool to be able to define strategy and to be able. So I see it as one. But one of the things that I advocate as well, that in the end of the day, we're people trying to help other people do something. And we shouldn't forget that connection, right? Because we'll find all sorts of different types of experts for different types of tools of things that we want to get done that will help us get things done. But one of the things that are lacking a lot of times is the internal communication to be able to drip down the information from our actual customer to the people that are creating that solution. And that's what I'm focusing on the most. Like, who within the company actually has the touch points to, let's say, the outer world, and how do they bring that information down to the team? Because we want to have that real interaction of a real person telling me, is it working, is it not? Do you like it, do you not, right? Is this fulfilling the need that you have?
No, I agree. I want to maybe give two examples of a failure and a win from AI, from AI tooling. I think what's important about a tool is trying to figure out what it is good for and what it's not good for, right? Or what it pretends to be good for. So we have job openings. If anybody's into Rust or Rails, please let us know. But we have a job opening, and I'll get, I want to say 50% AI-generated cover letters. And it's so often, it's so clear, because they all sound the same. It's all the same bullshit, right? And you're like, okay, go fuck yourself, right? Like, it's just off the bat. You're like, you don't care about the thing. It's obviously the spray and pray thing. You don't care about our company. You don't care about our values or our mission or whatever.
That's
I don't
interesting.
need to.
Would you say the cover letters or the CVs themselves are written with AI?
I mean, the CVs, they'll just send the same CV to everybody. Okay. The cover letters are supposed to be specific.
Personal one. Oh, and that's where you see
and I will take a 3-sentence cover letter that cares about what we're doing over a 5-paragraph cover letter that's generated by OpenAI that I've started realizing that they are, right? It took me the first 5 to realize that they are. And then it's like, okay, the next 20, I know that they are. And so now I can just. Which
paragraph discloses that?
Wait, say that again?
In which paragraph do you realize?
It's almost immediate now. I can scan them. Like, they all look the same, right? They all take the keywords from whatever our job post is, and they put it into something, and they all come out the same way. And it's very, very clear that that's what's happening. And so I can just cross them off the list.
Lots of weasel words.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible how often that happens now.
Sorry, do people read these nowadays?
The cover letters.
I don't.
Well,
before their CV probably.
Apply for companies if it's a mandatory field.
So we do. We have a thing of what's interesting about the company, right? And again, it doesn't need to be. Oh, okay. Well, whatever. You upload your CV and then you say what's interesting about, like, why are you applying to this job? And anyways, so that is a clear failure that has come up in the last couple months that never was a thing that I encountered before.
I do think that in Berlin it's easier to catch because the language level and the type of English is different here. Like, if it was in the US, it would be even more, or even less standing out.
Maybe. I feel like in Berlin, it's, people, like, Berlin is very international, right? And so there's a lot of people from different backgrounds, from different countries with different language levels, and it doesn't really, I don't need perfect English. I'd almost, actually, now, I really actually go for the non-perfect English because I know it's not OpenAI.
Exactly.
And it's clear, as long as it communicates properly, I don't care that it's perfect English. Most of the time, it's not going to be, right? Like, or you know, I don't know. I probably don't even write in perfect English. But on the win side is actually much smaller. Like in GitButler, I don't want to create branch names, right? And so we have this thing where you can send essentially a diff to OpenAI and say, what would the name of the branch be that has these changes in it? And it's like, here's the name of the branch. And it's not like that's 10 seconds to come up with the name of the branch, but you still have to kind of think about it. And it's nice to just hit a button and be like, and you're like, that's exactly what I would name. That's actually better than I would name the branch, right? Or if you're gonna, actually a big thing, if you guys are software developers where you have like a thing you just want to commit and push up somewhere, and you don't want to come up with a commit message, like, and you're just like, did some shit, right? And you commit it, which is just to push it, just to get it out, right? And so we have a thing where it's not like I want to make every commit message this. It's just if I'm gonna write, I wrote some shit, I'd rather hit a button that at least generates something that's close to what the diff that I generated was, right? And it's like, oh, I modified these files, and you're like, fantastic. That's much better than I would have done. It's obviously generated, but like it's better over there. We have a question in the front row.
Yes, I have a question. How does the product manager work together?
How would the product manager respond to that request?
When you're writing a CV with...
Like just like, I want this code out of my way, it should be deployed in production. I don't care what's the commit message.
All right, sorry. Before you answer this, I'll tell you, this is entirely created, this is a problem entirely created and then solved by me, which is one of the best things to do, right? You create a problem and then you solve it. So it's a problem because Git has no way to transfer data from one computer to another unless you commit it, right? Because the push protocol won't allow that. And so you have to do a commit if you want to get it to GitHub in order to update a pull request that needs some change or some review. And so, and really the only way to get something integrated is through a GitHub pull request if that's the thing that you're using. And so you have to come up with something, right? In order to A, save your work, which is Git's fault, or B, get it reviewed and integrated, which is GitHub's fault. And so...
No, I completely agree with you. Like,
you fuck stuff up, Scott.
I'm like, what should I call this? So I completely agree with you.
Yeah. So yeah, create a problem and then write something to solve it.
I would say now when you're prompting on ChatGPT the cover letter, make sure that you say, make it not pretentious, add some mistakes in English.
Create some...
Right. Like have 3 words with a spelling mistake, a common spelling mistake.
It's clear though. Like actually it's... Oh, sorry, we have another question.
So, I don't know if it's a question or like how do you just see that, but for me it's always like a challenge to kind of align the code that I'm writing, that I'm pushing, like the, I don't know, pull request to a Jira ticket or a linear ticket. Like, is there something that GitButler would just like align these two? Because in the end, like, I push the code because in the end it's history. Like, if someone would look back and say, you know, this is the change that happened this time and this is the reason, and probably the reason is somewhere written in a Jira ticket or somewhere else. How do we, I think this is, for me, the challenge, and how do you see that? Also as a product, but also, you know, as a, like, the best workflow. Like, how do you see this?
So I'll start
with my nerdy sort of interpretation of philosophically how to think about this, which is partially why I wanted to work on something like GitButler, which is I think that Git has some design decisions that aren't great. One is, and the biggest one I think, is that the Git commit is massively overloaded in what it's trying to accomplish for the modern software developer. So it is saving work, it is preparing work for transmission over the network, because you can't do it otherwise, and it is documenting changes that you're making to the code base. And I think all 3 of those are orthogonal. They should be orthogonal. You should be able to do those all completely separate from each other, and you can't do it the way that Git is designed. And so one of the things that I want to do with GitButler is to try to separate those so you can document and share and save as completely separate operations that are all there, that do those jobs well. And it's just not how Git is designed. And it's one of the things where, like, you know, if we come back to sort of product design or product management, is thinking about what are we really trying to solve with a problem set that our users are experiencing, right? And especially with something like Git, or with something like, I mean, think of any tool that you guys have been using for 10 years that hasn't really changed that much. What are you taking for granted that you're working around and trying, like, what are the real problem sets you're trying to solve with it, as opposed to what could it look like, right? Like, what ideally, like, think about something like git blame or something. Like, what are you really trying to answer with that? Are you trying to say, who is literally the last person that changed white space on this line, right? Or whatever? Or are you trying to say, I want to modify this function, and so I want to know what happened to this function. What is the story of pull requests and discussions and conversations that happen about this thing, and like issues from Sentry or whatever, like everything that happened when somebody modified this or when somebody wanted to, and what the conversation was. Like, that's what you want to answer, right? And so you have to do archaeology around it, but all you can really get out of your tool is, here's the last commit that happened to change that. And sometimes it's wanted to fix some shit, right? Because you had to do that in order to push it up, which is fine. But like, that's the best you can do. So the question is, going back to this first principles of what are you trying to do with the tool set that you have, right? And is there some better thing you can do to answer those questions? And sometimes it's a very, very hard question to answer, right? Like people do, or git log. What are you trying to answer with git log? You have all these fucking, you know, subway lines of bullshit running all over the place, and you're like, let's just rebase everything so I have one straight line. And it's like, but also, what are you trying to answer with a straight line? I want to know what has been introduced and what those conversations were like and why they were introduced. That is very different than a subway line is ugly and a straight line is pretty, right? And so this is why anyways, sorry, I'm going on a whole thing here.
But maybe I'll just add, from the product point of view, I don't really care exactly what you write down. What I care about is the way that you're documenting things. Is it over-documenting it? Is it under-documenting it? Who is the person that's reading it, and can they get any type of value of what you wrote down? That's all I care about. In the end of the day, if you're wasting time on trying to figure something out that should have been written, then I'm concerned about it because you're killing my team's velocity. And if you're over-documenting it and everything's taking you too long just because you're spending so much time and energy on it, then that would be a concern of mine. What exactly you write down, I don't get to that level.
I want to double down on that and come back to the AI thing and say that I think that the main valid 90% of why I use AI tools today is documentation. Mm-hmm. I actually think that replacing documentation is the most valuable thing that AI has right now in the way that LLMs are structured now. Because I started, like, GitButler is written in Tori, which the backend is Rust. I've never written Rust before, but I need to do a lot of Git stuff. And so I needed to learn how to write Rust, and I didn't want to read the book or, like, learn or do research. And so I just asked OpenAI, how would you, iterate through an array like in Rust? And it's like, here you go. And I'm like, okie dokie. And like, I don't, and then it error, and I copied the error into OpenAI. I was like, this is how it failed. How would you fix that? And I was like, no problem. This is how you do it. Like, I'm so happy all the time. And so that's kind of how I learned Rust before I got frustrated and actually read through the Rust book, which took me 3 months. But I feel like that is that is what I would use Stack Overflow for before that, right? Which has the exact same problems. It doesn't quite solve the problem, but it gets you like in the direction and tells you kind of generally what the functions are that you need to research or something like that. But I'm curious about this from a code archaeology standpoint, like I was saying with Blame or something. Is it useful to have code archaeology tools in Git, or is it useful to have all the conversations you've had in your engineering channel in Slack and all of the code comments and all of the commit messages and just say, tell me about this function, what is the story of this, and have an AI go through and put something together for you that otherwise a senior person that's been on the team for 10 years would otherwise be the only person that can really tell you that story. Like, I think that I look up documentation 30% as much as I did previously because I can ask OpenAI for a lot of open source documentation now, and it is much, much better than me figuring it out from the Python docs or whatever, right? Actually, the big thing that I did recently was, sorry, now I'm just rambling, but the big thing I did recently was we had this big survey, and we had all this big CSV of 1,200 survey results or whatever, and I put it into Hex. I don't know if anybody uses Hex, hex.tech. It's like a Jupyter notebook type thing, but it has like an AI thing, and you can say, I want a Python cell, and here's the CSV, and you just tell it what you want it to do with the data, and then it writes the pandas code for you, and then runs it. And if it fails, it has a button that says, fix my stuff, and then it rewrites it for you again until you get something that's valuable. And you're like, that is actually what I wanted. And it is incredibly good at that, right? Like, I don't have to, every time I did this before with any Jupyter notebook stuff, I had to go look up Python, pandas documentation and figure out how do I do data frames and stuff. Like, I don't do it often enough to remember. Or how do I do this thing in SQL or whatever, right? And like now there's these tools that help you not look up documentation, right? And so this is kind of where I see the future of, the first frontier of the future of software development is getting rid of documentation in a way where you document it well, and then, but you're not looking up, there's not documentation websites as much, right? Sorry.
I'm thinking about documentation also in the sense of, because I'm thinking about the why and the people, and what I want to read in documentation is why did you take that choice? Right. Like, not what you did exactly, but why did you do that? Like, this is what was going on, this is the decision we made, that's why we did it. And then later on, when I look back at it, it's much easier to look at it and say, oh, I know why. Then probably there's, you know, this bunch of stuff that I also need to check because these are things that are all related.
No, I agree. I think actually what would be really interesting is all of the sources of data that we don't have in our source code, right? Like, we have the commit messages, but we don't have the conversations that happen in an engineering channel. We don't have the documentation that happens in some external thing that's linked to it. We don't have, unless, you know, it happens to be in it. Like, we don't have so many different things where it'd be really nice to have that all in one place and have large language models be able to tell us like a story of the thing. But otherwise, it's very, very difficult to do. Like, this is the first year, really, that we've had even the tooling, much less the data, to be able to answer questions in this manner, and I find it very exciting. There was a question in the back. Hold on.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about the process that you were talking about, like writing the code typically, right, using the API. Right? Have you seen the case where it kind of gets stuck in a local minimum where you're trying to prompt it, but it still does the same thing again and again and again, and then if I try to write it maybe out of the past, like, of course this doesn't happen always, but there will be like 5%, 10% of the cases where you feel like, oh, I have to make sure it understands, so you try to prompt again and again and again.
Are you using the free version or the paid version?
I'm using GPT-4 though, which is my free version, but it's coming with big. So
my answer to that is
different models underlying there. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had ChatGPT or Cloud, or, you know, like the Anthropic has Cloud or whatever, give me any snippet of code that worked. Like, it's just come real close, and then I've had to figure out how to change it or whatever. But what's very valuable to me is trying to remember how to loop over an array in Rust, right? Like that, I don't have that memorized because I'm used to other models, right? And so I can do that and be like, if it doesn't work, I can be like, oh, I know enough about it to change it. So it is really more, to me, of a Stack Overflow type thing, of just give me the pointer in the direction generally that people solve this problem, and then I can use my knowledge from that point forward to make it work. And actually, this is a completely separate thing, but I would really love to see open source go more that direction, of more the snippet direction, of saying, here's a very small problem that I want to solve, rather than something you have to have a whole repository on GitHub for, right? Like, or a whole, like, I mean, GitHub, you can't, nobody opens a repository for a little tiny way of solving something, right? But it would be really nice to say, I want to solve this problem. Here's what ChatGPT gave me, you know, out of an LLM. I made it work, and here's the thing that worked for that prompt, right? And then have a database of that type of thing. I think it would be really interesting for open source to get much smaller and much more focused.
It's a little bit like a library.
It's snippet. I'd rather have it be a huge snippet library, right? Whereas it's not that. Like the barrier to entry to GitHub, the friction to entry to GitHub is still high enough that you want to have it be a library at the minimum, right? Or there's not, you can do gists or something, but like you really want it to be something that is includable and useful, you know, and testable by itself. Anyways.
You said gist. I was in multiple arguments, gist or gist, so good to hear the answer.
I can definitively answer that because I wrote gist. That was my first project at GitHub. In fact, if you go to gist.github.com/1, I think, I have the first gist.
And what's there?
Well, it is a small poem about being the first gist, and then there's 400 comments. And the fun thing is, if you comment, it sends an email to the other 400 people that have commented beforehand. So be very careful before you do that, because now you get yourself into a train of people who found the first gist and says, hey, I found it too, and then you spam 400 people. Anyways, don't do that.
Just unrelated, but on the topic of Rust, the code is close but not enough. This is one of the reasons you should be using Go. That's for a different meetup, and I would love to talk about that as well.
All right, let's fight.
I'm down.
I have a question. Did you listen to the presentation earlier?
Yeah, no, I was in the back.
Amazing. So it will be easier then. So, no. So obviously you're a very strong personality, one could say opinionated about the product. Sorry. So the question's coming. And then with such a strong personality and a vision for the product, and you seem like you can visualize every single part of it. Inbal comes to you with an Eisenhower matrix and wants to convince you of building something differently or at a different pace at a different time. How do you go about
That is a great question to come back to the first part of this. Actually, I came up to her right after this, and I said, I have one question about the presentation, which is who determines what is important and what is, what was it?
Urgent.
Urgent, sorry. What is important, what is urgent? Because in some companies, the engineers decide what is important, what is urgent. Sometimes it's customer service, sometimes it's management, sometimes it's leadership. Like, it depends, right? And I think all of those teams need to have, and I'm very, very curious from very different company sizes, who depends on, like, who decides urgency and who decides importance. Because usually I would say management decides importance and, I don't know, like customer service decides urgency, right? Like, we're seeing this a lot, but there's also, we want to impress investors or raise more funds, or like, it depends. Is it a when I left GitHub, we were 450 employees or something. Like, it was a big, like, it was a rocket ship at that point. Now we're 8, right? Like, it's a very different thing of what is important and what is urgent. And it makes a big difference, right? Like, I think that the framework is very valid, but it really depends on who is determining that matrix. I don't have a good, I think actually the bigger question is that, right? Like, in your organization, who determines that matrix? Because I think we can all agree kind of how, or I think most of us can agree more or less how to do that if we know where something lands on that vector. But it's really hard to determine what the values of the vector is. For me, actually, the funnier thing was going back to tech debt, right? And what's fun to work on and how that percentage works out. Because in my working with teams that are highly engineering centric, I would say that if you hire very senior people, they really love working on tech debt, way more than new features, right? Like, I feel like management or junior employees or whatever love working on new features, and really senior employees want to really dig into tech debt. Like, you can have essentially nothing change in the website for a year and have 8 people working on it all the time and clear up all the tech debt and have nothing happen. And I've seen it happen over and over and over again, right? From everything from 400 employees to 10 employees, it doesn't matter. And like, people have, if you hire people who love craft, right, and really want to have beautiful code and that's what they want to work on, versus you have people that are like me, a little bit dumb, but like, they really care that there's a usage of the product at the end. then it's not that they want to work on new stuff, they want to see people use their shit, right? Which is a little bit different. And so that's more where I struggle with. I almost feel like I need to encourage engineers to care more about new features and keeping stuff up, and less about let's make things 10% faster when we could just buy another server, right? Like there's more practical ways of solving those problems sometimes. But anyways, that's maybe a slightly separate thing.
And how about you if you have someone like him in front of you? Who's
So-
so excited and
but that's
Am
the
I
thing.
too much? Am I putting out too much
It's like a job
positive
interview
energy?
right now. It's like who's evaluating who for a job interview.
Yeah, I'm just imagining the two of you as each other.
But you know what? That's what's so interesting, because when you're working with people that are passionate about what they're doing and being able to convince them to think about things a little bit differently, it's such a huge accomplishment. And that's why I work in very small startups, and I work very closely with founders, because they're absolutely sure that they know everything exactly the way that they want it to be, right? No offense, but I'm sure you know everything about the company. But let me tell you a few things. One of the things that really help is having an understanding that ambiguity and things that we can't all agree on are detrimental to being able to understand what is important and what is urgent. And what I do as a leader within companies, right, I hold CPO, director, VP, and product positions, and part of the things that I do is I create tools for the company to be able to communicate things that are obvious, to trickle down from the top down to everybody within development, and from development to be able to trickle up the things that they think are most valuable, to be able to find something in the middle. So for me, I believe that place in the middle between everybody, between customer support and marketing and sales and tech and product and business and everybody, the people that are in the middle are product. And these are the people that are supposed to be able to communicate these different things and to be able to create tools for everybody to understand. So one of the examples, and there are very heavy frameworks, right? So you have OKRs. Oh my God, OKRs. Are we doing this again? Okay, but that's again looking at things and just copy-pasting something of a huge company to be able to stick it on a 15-people startup. It probably won't work. It's kind of the same like taking Scrum word to word and trying to apply it to your team. So what I'm saying is, take something like an OKR, right? Have a good understanding. What are the objectives? Like, break it down. That's part of the things that I'm advising to teams.
You said OKR several times. Can you say what it stands for?
So objective, keys, and results, right? Or KPIs. So they're just key indicators for things that are success within a team. And if we all have a really good understanding of what are the objectives of the company, it's much easier to have a conversation on what is important. Because some things are not in the objectives of the company, so they might not be so important, for example, to business, right? Or if there are things that you would say an objective of the company is having happier users, but everything is so slow on the app, and people are falling out the app because, I don't know, the data is inconsistent with what's happening on whatever it's monitoring, then you would be able to say, hey, then the tech debt that is causing that issue is actually of high importance. So creating a language that everybody can speak is something that really helps with having a really good understanding of things that are important and urgent within a company. That was the first part, and I already forgot what the second part was, but I also had something to say about that.
He hated that.
I know. That was the wrong answer.
I'm out.
I can't.
Sorry, buddy.
Any more questions?
I'm going to go here because you've asked 3 questions now. I'm just kidding. We'll get back to you. Asked one. I just wanted to let everybody know, if you did not know what OKR stands for, I sold a company to Microsoft for $7 billion, and I didn't remember I don't know what OKR stands for. So just don't feel bad if you don't know what.
Absolutely.
Just Google stuff. It's fine.
Absolutely.
If I'd be in board meetings and somebody would say something, and I'd be like,
of course.
OKR, absolutely. Yeah. That's what we want to do. Question.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for chatting about the best language learning experience I've had.
That's why we took off.
Okay, so
before he got laid off, by the way. So,
It's paper.
because they were using GitHub for product management there, and they were not using Jira. And for me as a product manager, it's like the dream, because I hate Jira. I think I want to destroy Jira. It's the worst tool in the world. So my question is, I don't know to who, maybe Inbal or you, like, do you have any stories about product teams using Git or whatever to replace Jira? So,
To clarify a little bit, there's a difference between GitHub and Git. So do you use GitHub issues or do you use Jira, I think, is kind of more the question, right? And I will let you answer the question.
I'll tell you what,
I can step in and share from my experience.
Yes,
I had the chance of working for 3 years in a company that had no product team.
Shock.
Actually, they were successful. They still are.
So not.
Only when they were large enough, they started setting up the product team, and all the requests, once they were approved to be requests, so once the request came in and actually went through the committee, in a lack of another word, of like CTO and head of engineering and person who was doing the account management, then it became a GitHub issue. And then when you would do a pull request, you would just do close this issue. And this would be pretty much the product management until a further notice.
Which is fantastic, because as product, I don't need that level of depth. Like, I am making sure that the product is going in the right direction, that the company, which is a business that needs to make money and make customers happy, that it's going in the right direction. And I'm not technical enough to micromanage the development teams that I'm working with. I need a much higher level explanation of what's going on. So whatever level you cut off, right? Because we're talking about documenting, like document for me as a product manager reading it, that's all you need to make visible for me. You can have under the iceberg, you can continue wherever you want to go, right? You don't have to write it all on Jira. You can hate Jira, that's fine. If you have a way to automate it and just like push the issues through, that's fine, as long as I have a good understanding what it is. And that's also one of the reasons that, like we're talking a little bit Scrum, but one of the reasons that the headline is, as I expect that will happen when, because that's kind of forcing development to talk in a language that is not techie, right? Explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. That's forcing you into that template, not because you actually, it's yeah, I can ramble on about how to write those, but well, yeah.
I mean, just as a not, it's not a counter argument. I've mostly worked in companies where I've used my own product, right? And so for the language learning thing, I was learning a language, and everyone in the company was learning a language, and we all had different viewpoints to it, but everybody, there was no non-stakeholders, I guess. And at GitHub and at GitButler, we also all use the product, right? And it's a very technical product, and so it's very hard to say, here's what the customer standpoint is that's not your standpoint to a degree. And so it becomes a little bit more difficult to be like, what is valid or what is not valid as like a customer story, because almost everybody has their own sort of customer story. And I you know, from a GitHub Jira standpoint, I think I would go into, I'm using GitHub more because it's public, and we have, like, our source code is available, and our issues are, and we're trying to develop in the open. And so now I'm really just keeping issues up to date so people know that we're tracking issues. Like that, know that if there's a thing I'm not working on, that they know that we're not working on it for a specific reason, or they know that we're not working on it yet because it's very hard, and I do a big write-up of why it's very technically difficult, right? And how we would approach it when we get to that point. And so it just depends on who your audience is, right? Is it your user base, if it's an open source project or an open core project or something? Is it your internal development team? Is it your management team? Is it, you know, is it your product team? Like, it's really, like, it depends on who loves what. I hate Jira, And I love Atlassian. I love Jay. Actually, at the conference that we're doing, my friend Jay was the president of Atlassian, right? And I'll shit on him about Jira because Jira's, to me, it's horrible in a way that they would add everything, right? Like, if you have a product where anybody asks for something and then you add that feature, and then there's a million features, like, then that becomes tasteless to a degree, right? If everybody asks for something and you push back and you say you shouldn't do it that way, then that was a little bit more GitHub. Now it's becoming more generalized because it's so big, right? And it just becomes really, really hard. Now I don't even know how to do stuff in GitHub. Like, if I don't know how to do stuff in GitHub, you probably don't know how to do stuff in GitHub, right? Like, that's a very specific use case. Like, I was there for a lot of it. But like, yeah, so it's just, it depends on who your audience is, right? It depends on who you're trying to communicate with and what you're trying to communicate. Is it your development team? Is your product team? Is your management team? Is your users? Like, it really, really depends on what your communication needs are and what you're trying to do. Because for us, we're a small team, we all know what we're working on. We're only using ticketing to communicate to each other in case we don't have somebody jumps from one issue to another and needs to catch up. It's not, I need to know what the user story is. But yeah, that changes with team size.
And that relates directly.
This guy had a question 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, but I'll just tell you that relates directly to write documentation for people that are reading it. So that, right? Like, who are you writing for? If your team is all people that are going to, dig inside the tech part, okay, if you're writing for a product manager to be able to communicate it to the rest of the company, you write it differently or you write it in a different location, right? You're making the information available for your audience. Who is the audience? Who is supposed to read this? Is it available to them? Can they understand what I wrote down?
Yeah, I mean, I think the location is the big part there, right? Like, where do people look for the documentation and what are they expecting and how do they find it? And that is really hard.
Yeah, and having agreements on how information is structured, where to look for it.
I want to go. Do you still have a question?
I think it's unrelated anymore, but I will ask you later. So
fair enough.
But the lady had a question.
In defining the company's growth strategy, how do they decide to be product-led or sales-led? Right. How do they decide to be what led or what led? So how do they decide to be product-led or be sales-led in a company when they're going, they want to be going forward and increase their growth in the company? Who is the bigger person in the company, like the product person or the sales person?
If they're doing it right or wrong, right?
I'm so sorry.
So the question is, if I understand it, I will rephrase and tell me if you got this right. If I got this right, in a company, how do you decide if the person who kind of has the last word, is it the product, is it the
product
user?
or sales? I see.
For example, sales,
Fuck
account
sales.
management.
You see, it's either you're right or you're wrong.
I'm kidding. If you guys are, I'm kidding. No, I sorry, I'm kidding, not kidding. Sales, so we ran into this in GitHub a lot. Because the GitHub engineers, like I said, we dog-fooded, right? Like, we were doing our own thing. But we didn't do anything that wasn't good for a GitHub-like team. So GitHub was great for a 10-person team when we were 10 people, and it was great for a 30-person team when we were 30 people, and it was great for a 100-person team when we were 100 people, and so on. What we were never good at was enterprise teams because we didn't use Okta, and we didn't use single sign-on. We didn't use like all this shit, and then people would come to us and be like, how come you don't have this? And we're like, you're dumb for using that, right? Like, that was kind of like our internal mentality. And the sales teams were customer service teams to a degree at that point, where they were like, it's not that we want to sell this. I mean, to some degree, obviously they were incentivized to sell this, but part of it was, this is what our customers want, and they will pay a lot of money to do it, right? Like, but this is what their needs are. They have needs for this, right? They needed to be SOC 2 compliant. They needed to be, like, have Okta integration, whatever. And so we learned from that. That was kind of, it's a different, I think of sales as a different type of customer service. Like, it is a way of getting information from an organization that's not like yourself to say, this is a need that they have. Don't worry, we'll clean that up later. It was a way of getting information from an organization that was not like yourself in a way that a customer service organization would say, here's a customer need that we have. And so that's how I've always thought about it. And so I don't think about them as necessarily different things. I think, I mean, even for GitButler, what we do a lot is go around and talk to people and buy beers and stuff and just see what is your workflow, what is frustrating you, what do you not like about Git. Like, you have to get this data that it's not everyone's going to be like you. You can shape opinion to a degree and try to be a thought leader, kind of, right? But like, there's so many different types of ways that people work. It doesn't matter what you're doing, right? Like, you have to talk to everybody. You have to get feedback from everybody. And I think sales teams is actually one of the better ways of doing that. So I actually like sales-led product development to a degree because it means there's real money behind it, right? Like, if you do any startup or whatever and nobody will pay for your stuff, but everybody's like, it seems like a good idea, then it's a bullshit idea. If you find people who will pay for your idea, then that's a great idea, right? That there's a transaction that happens. And I find that actually very valuable. What do you think?
I think that I believe in product-led organizations. And the reason I believe in product-led organizations is if you're doing it correctly, you're not working as product. You should never work in a bubble. You're not in your own thoughts. You're sourcing information from all over the company. And one of the things that there's always this struggle, is product more business, is product more tech? Like, where are you? And I believe you're supposed to be more in the middle. And in the middle means that you have an understanding that you're working in a company that needs to be able to pay the salaries of the people working in it. And part of the people that are doing that, making sure that that actually happens, are people in sales. They're the eyes and ears of the company. And being able to retrieve information from them and feed information to them is extremely important. But, and that's a very big but, I believe that product is the person or the organization within the department or whatever within the organization to be able to make the decisions, because they're also so much closer to tech. And if you're doing it in a more harmonious kind of way, you would be able to feed it both ways. You would be able to feed tech with information from the outside world. This is what everybody wants. These are the cool things going on, and you would be able to feed back into sales to say, this is the cool new thing that we want to build into the future. This is what you can sell to be able to be, marketed or whatever in 6 months. This is something that we would be able to achieve in a year. And then you manage to get to there always has to be some type of tension between like these amazing dreams, balloons, woo, in the air, and tech is like a rock sitting on the bottom. It's like, wait, I need to move a little bit. Like at a time, we need to keep things stable. And like, I find products sitting right in the middle, and that way you have the best vantage point on like the entire business.
I agree. Actually, if it wasn't clear, I think it's an input, right? Like it's a useful input. Customer service is a useful input. Yeah. Actually, this is just a general thing that I tell everybody. If you're working in a company that sends out emails, never have them be no reply emails. Like every email that your company sends out should be replyable, and it goes to customer service, because everybody should be able to give you feedback on your product as easily as possible. Like, don't make them go through 3 clicks and go to a form and say what department it goes to and like fill out a subject line and all that. Like, it should be, I get an email and I respond to it and say, I don't like this, and that goes into your inbox, right? It goes into somebody's inbox. And I think that sales is the same thing, and customer service is the same thing. It should be inputs into what are people frustrated about, what do people want, what are people asking for, and then that goes to product, and then product has taste in what they want to do and what they want to say no to. Absolutely. And I think that's actually a really, really important balance in the company, in any company.
We are one more question, and then we will be slowly wrapping up with one last question. Yes.
So just on the product level, so recently Airbnb removed the entire product management team, right? They removed the entire product management team. Basically, the designers can be product managers. They can lead the product. The developers can actually bring out the strategy, so they know what the customer problem is they're trying to solve. So where the companies are moving towards, you don't need a product person in the company. The designers can lead that. So what do you think? Do we need a product person now? Like the designers can do the job. So what are your thoughts on that?
I love that. I think it was a talk that I listened to in, I think it was 2016. One of the leaders from Airbnb, and he was talking about it, that it really resonated with me, that they're a design-driven company. So it's not very much of a surprise that they're giving more power to designers and like creating these new types of jobs. I think that what's really important to view is, and this is something that I'm also seeing with other professions, for example, quality assurance. A lot of companies are kind of dropping the quality assurance people and saying, oh, these are responsibilities of developers now. The underlying thing is the responsibilities and the decisions to be made are the same. It's just a different person that is accomplishing those goals, right? So the work didn't disappear. It's the same type of work, you're just giving it to a different type of person. And I think that it really depends on let's say, the flavor of the product that you're creating. What is the highest goal? What is the highest thing that you find within the company or within the product, and what kind of people can best understand that to be able to bring the product to where you want, right? Will product people disappear? I don't believe product people will disappear. I think they are called now product marketing or product design, right? So it still has an understanding that the product, what I am working software is what I'm giving to my customers. There needs to be a person that has a really good understanding of what the product is and who is in need for it. They're just maybe more inclined to one part of it, which might be design or, for example, right? Or more a technical side in another example.
The only thing is that, like, you don't need the racy metrics, you don't need all these, like, the OKRs anymore, because like, the problem is you can solve the problem, get the product out quickly, then, like, you're thinking about all these processes anymore. So you can keep it lean. I think that is the motivation behind it. So.
But you can also keep it lean by having a minute to think on what is important for my product. I don't have to take the entire framework. I don't need to take each and every matrix that I find online. I need to find the ones that are relevant for my team, right? So if the RACI doesn't apply to your team, fine, then don't use it. You don't have to rename the name of the profession. But a lot of times that's what people need in order to have this kind of shift in their mind to be able to understand that maybe I should be able to choose other things. Like, you are entitled to not follow Scrum exactly how it is in the book. Maybe you need to change the profession in order to, like, say, hey, I'm reinventing this, when actually I view product as something that you're supposed to reinvent it.
I agree with the thought that whatever decision you make, you should still go back to evaluate that, call that how you want, matrix or some other process. And with evaluation, I'm going to my last question, which is, like you said, you read the description, that's cool, the cross-section of product and Git. I'm going to say a statement, tell me if you agree with it, and then what you think about it.
Oh boy.
Disagree.
I already say no. Git is a little bit like project management for what already happened. It's just a way of managing and presenting everything that happened, while all the different parts of product management, like Agile and Scrum and so on, is a little bit like the project management of what will happen. So if you put this on a timeline, it's kind of the Git and the techniques of product management.
I have to say, that is maybe the weirdest question I've ever had.
This is just the statement. The question comes after that. Thank you.
Do
you agree with this presentation of putting those two together on this timeline of past and future?
I don't, but for interesting, okay, but go, what's your question?
Why not?
That's your question?
No,
that's your follow-up question?
But that's my side. I'm branching off.
I think Git and most version control was designed to not ask the question first and figure out if it's a good question, and then provide the answer. I think Git was designed, and most actually the way that GitHub works and the way that most version control tools work is to say, I have an answer, and I need to convince everyone that is a stakeholder that this is a question worth answering. And so you would provide a patch series to a mailing list or something and say, I've answered this question that I had, and I think it's a worthy thing, and I need to get feedback on if this is the right question after I've done the work, and if it's the right way of answering the question, if that makes sense. And then you kind of iterate on that and get something accepted, right? And GitHub is an iteration of that makes it easier, but it's still, it's very rare to say, here's a problem that I have, how are we going to solve it, and then solve it in an open source sort of world. And product management or a company that provides, like open source never has product management, right? Like there's never somebody that's like, here's who's going to work on something next and why it's valuable.
Sometimes there is like
and
a steering
what's
committee of Kubernetes
what's important and
so
what's
on.
urgent, right? Like there's never somebody that says what's important and what there's no graph of that in open source. And so I think what's really interesting to me is how open source works at all in some cases. And it's not good sometimes, right? It's just whoever cares the most and not what needs to be done the most necessarily. Or who has the most taste, or who can sort of, guide the product to a nice place. Anyways, so that's why I would disagree with that to a degree, is that I think organizations are much better at building product for these reasons than open source as a sort of user-facing products for that reason. So because there's no product management. And I think product management has a huge place in what should be built and why it should be built and to have taste in the product. I actually, sorry, before we go on to the actual question you had, before I go off on my thing even more, is I think of myself as more of a product manager, right? Like as the CEO of the company, because I am writing code, I can write code. I am writing code sometimes. I think Pavel over here can attest it's really horrible code. There's a couple other people in this group probably that have seen my Rust code. But I know what I want I have an idea of what I want the product to be, and I talk to people, and that's my job, right? Is to say, this is important and this is not important, or this is interesting, or like take ideas or come up with ideas and try to help triage to a degree, but it's not I'm coming up with everything and I'm building everything, right? And so I think of myself really at the top as a product manager, and that is super, super important, and Git doesn't help that. That's the main difference between a corporate product and an open source product is the complete lack of product management and somebody who cares about that level.
I don't have an exact answer, but it did get me thinking, which I like that, which is because I'm thinking about the branching of an idea, like being able to roll back and then like redo it in a different type of way. And I think that that's something that might be a little bit lost in product management. I think that you create this really big idea and then you break it down into smaller tasks and you complete a part of it. And a lot of times the rest is kind of either chucked away, someone else comes in, they think they're much smarter, they'll do it much better, they have something completely different to do. But that would be, what service?
I just keep getting one.
That's fantastic.
She wants me to get louder as this comes up.
But I think that it would be actually a really interesting concept that I'd like to really think about is everything that has to do with seeing product and everything that has to do with documenting products in a more branch-like kind of way. Like where did the idea start from, the different types that we did, how did this product mature in more of a visual way?
If we take timeline, past, future, and if we also put the Git branch on it, the Git line, timeline on it, everything that already happened, you can work with using Git in the past, right? You can see who wrote what code. You can do that archaeology that we mentioned. Everything that is in the past is manageable with Git. With this part, would you agree? I'll take a quick yes, no.
I have no idea what that means.
All the code that somebody wrote is documented with GitHub. If I want to see who wrote what code in the past, I will use Git for that.
Sure.
Yes, I got 2 yeses. If I'm looking at the future timeline, everything is sort of documented in Jira tickets or some other product management tool. So if we take like a history of all the code and we put it on this timeline, big generalization and oversimplification, the past is Git, the future is product tools.
And you need to transition. And also the language would be different.
Yes,
and the level of documentation.
It's like a very much zoom out. It's like you started your mirror, it was very much zoomed out. That's how we are right now. And that's how we're looking at this. With this statement, do you agree?
Yeah, like the iceberg as well.
Cool. Okay. How do you see that cross-section that we managed to like put that on that timeline, those 2 parts, in the sense of like, one idea when I was asking myself this question, I see that cross-section, if I take all the things that were rolled back, all the things that were made and then overridden to be removed, for example, and I somehow link them to all the related Jira tickets or GitHub issues and so on. This can be like an efficient way of planning, evaluating future tasks.
And raising up things that already failed.
For example, or already saying that's a bad idea because based on history.
Yeah.
Do you have other ideas for such a cross-section if we look at this?
No, let's build a company. Let's do that. That's a good thing.
No.
I like the yes and the no. Cool. All right. Thank you very much. How much time do we still have left for networking? Now that the panel is done, before I say the final words, until when are we here?
Oh, I don't know. When do you guys want to go?
Let me find the responsible adults. Thank you very much then for the questions, for the long answers, for the short answers. I appreciate both. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for listening. And if you want to hear this again, this will be on YouTube. A round of applause for you all.
Oh, cheers.
And until we are being told and we're welcome to just chat with each other, and all the questions that you didn't ask now, please find the panelists and ask them. See you
Thanks,
at the next
everybody.
event, I hope.
Thank
Cheers.
you.